Hi Biology, Mr. Wagner here. Today we're going to be talking about kingdom Animalia, also known as zoology, which is a study of animals. Let's go through our notes. You should have your note packet out. We're going to fill these in. Your note packet is going to be very important to study for the test. Let's see what we got here. All right, so there are a variety in living things. There's a variety in cell number. You can either be single-celled or multi-celled. Multi just means many. There's also a variety in living things and how energy is obtained. Some animals are called autotrophs. That is, they make their own food from inorganic sources. Plants, some bacteria, some proteins make their own food using light energy. The majority of these are plants who use photosynthesis to make sugar. That's like 99% of autotrophs are plants or algae. Heterotroph. Hetero means they cannot make their own food. They have to obtain energy by consuming other organisms. That's everybody else other than plants, basically. Hetero means other, so you have to go to some other place to get your food. Autotroph means I can automatically make my own. It's the difference between those two. Symmetry. This butterfly is an example of symmetry. The left side and the right side are similar. This is called bilateral symmetry. An organism can be cut in half in only one plane or one direction and have both sides look alike. Most animals, as well as humans, have bilateral symmetry. You have your left side of your body and the right side of the body. Cut right down the middle, both sides would be identical. But notice it's only in one way. I can't cut myself from top to bottom, and my legs and my head are not going to match up. So I can't cut this butterfly sideways, from wing to wing. That's not going to work. Only in one plane or one direction. Does it have bilateral? That means two lateral sides are the same. Here's an example of something called radial symmetry. An organism can be cut in half in several different ways through the center, and the two halves will be alike. So no matter which way you cut this starfish, either this way or this way or this way or this way or whatever, it's still going to be the same left side and right side. This is called radial. Radial is like talking about a circle in a radius. Radial symmetry. And then finally, you have organisms that are not symmetrical at all. These are called asymmetry or asymmetrical. A off before a word often means not, so it's not symmetrical. So in organisms whose shape changes or has such a great variety of shape, it cannot be found. You can't cut this in any way and have the top and the bottom or right and left match up exactly. Asymmetrical. So, in kingdom Animalia, you have heterotrophs, eukaryotic, and multicellular. So what we talked about before, that was like all organisms, but now we're specifically talking about kingdom Animalia. In order for you to be in kingdom Animalia, you have to be a heterotroph. You cannot make your own food. You have to be eukaryotic. That's a cell that does have a nucleus. And you have to be multicellular. Those three characteristics automatically put you in kingdom Animalia. So that's what separates us from fungus and from plants and from protists and other things. Kingdom Animalia. These are the three characteristics necessary to be an animal. Inside the kingdom, remember it's kingdom, phylum, class, order. Kingdom, phylum. Phylum is vertebrates. There are three subphylums, and the phylum is Chordata. Chordata stands for like a cord, which is basically my spinal cord. These are animals that have a spinal cord. There are some animals that don't have a spinal cord, like, for instance, ants would be insects. They don't have a spine, so they are not in the phylum Chordata, or vertebrates. They do not have a vertebrae or a backbone. In order to be an animal kingdom, you must have a backbone and a vertebrae. Have a backbone, can be made out of cartilage. You have to have a distinct head. You have to have an endoskeleton. That's a skeleton on the inside. That's what separates us from like crabs and insects. They have the skeleton on the outside. They have an exoskeleton. In order to be an animal, you have to have a skeleton on the inside. And they make up only 3% of all animals. So 97% of all animals on the planet are not, 93% of all animals, 97% of all animals on the planet are not vertebrates or chordata phylum. So that's unusual. But that 3% that is, we think of things like bird, fish, mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and humans, things like that. All right. Invertebrates, these are the ones without the backbone. They make up about 32 different phyla. They do not have a backbone in vertebrates, so they don't have a vertebrae. They do not have a cranium. A cranium is a scientific name for a skull. And they may have an exoskeleton. A jellyfish would be another example of an invertebrate. It does not have a vertebrate, but it also does not have an exoskeleton. And there are over 2 million different species of these. Includes insects, crustaceans, mollusks, echinoderms, sponges, and worms. Crustaceans would be like sea creatures like crabs, things like that. All right, so we're going to focus all of our attention on vertebrates. This is the phylum Chordata, subphylum Verbrata. This is usually what we think of when we think of the word animal. When you go to the zoo and you see an animal, this is normally what we think of. Characteristics of all vertebrates. They have a spinal cord with a brain at the anterior end. Anterior means the front. Brain is protected by a skull. Body has either a backbone or a notochord. A notochord would be, we have like vertebrae that our spinal cord runs through. A notochord would be another area of support for the spine in other animals. They have an endoskeleton made of bone and or cartilage. They have an axial and an appendicular skeleton. Axial would be like your head and chest down to your pelvis. Appendicular is anything that sticks off to the side. Think of like an appendage. An appendage would be like a leg or an arm. They have bilateral symmetry. You can cut them down. Left and right sides will be even. And they have complex body systems like your circulatory system, respiratory system, nervous system, reproductive system, and so on. Of these, there are 7 classes of vertebrates. Okay, 7 classes of vertebrates. Remember, kingdom, animal, phylum, chordata, class, and then finally order. Kingdom, phylum, class, order. So these are the 7 different classes of animals, of vertebrates. We have Mammalia. That's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the slideshow, basically. We're going to look at these first 7 and then spend our time on mammals. Aves, we have a whole unit coming up on aves. Reptiles, reptilia. Amphibians, we're going to talk about both aves and reptiles and amphibians. We are not going to talk about osteichthyes or chondrichthyes. Those are basically either osteichthyes are bony fish, chondrichthyes are cartilage fish, and the final one is cyclostomata. Those are weird ones. We'll get to those eventually. All right, let's talk about class mammals. In order to be in the mammal, you have to have the following things. You have to be endothermic, controlling your own body temperature. You have to breathe with lungs. You have to have hair and mammary glands. Mammary glands is basically being able to feed milk to your young, which is what we can do, feed milk to your young. That's your mammary glands. And there are about 4,000 living species of mammals. Example, cat, dog, rodent, ape, elephant, human, etc. All right, let's talk about aves. Aves are birds. They are endothermic, warm-blooded, just like we are. They also breathe with lungs, just like we do. They have wings, feathers, and 2 feet. So that's what separates class aves from all these other classes. How do we know? They have wings, feathers, and they're bipedal or 2-feeted. And there's about 9,000 living species: eagle, robin, penguin, emu, etc. All right, what about reptiles? They are ectothermic. That means cold-blooded. They breathe with their lungs. They have dry, scaly skin. There's about 6,000 living species. And examples of reptiles: snakes, lizards, and turtles. That's pretty easy. Again, we'll have a whole unit on reptiles. Amphibians, we'll talk about them also in the future. They are also ectothermic, cold-blooded. They have moist, soft skin. So the difference between a reptile and an amphibian: reptile, dry, scaly skin; amphibian, moist, wet skin. If you ever have an animal, you're not sure if it's a reptile or amphibian, if it's slimy, like think of slimy or wet, it's probably an amphibian. Usually breathe with gills in the younger stages, and then they breathe with lungs when they get to be an adults. They go through a transmorphosis or metamorphosis, where they breathe with lungs later in the life. Okay, so that's the defining characteristics of amphibians. 3,000 living species: frogs, salamanders, and caecilians. Again, we'll have a whole unit on amphibians coming up in the future. Osteichthyes. Okay, here's the thing. These are bony fish. They are cold-blooded, aquatic with fins and scales. They breathe with gills. Skeleton is made partially or wholly from bone. There's about 21 living species. Notice that for mammals, we only had about 4,000 living species. So there's a whole lot more, almost 6 times as many species of fish as there are of mammals. And they include things like perch, bass, trout, tuna, and seahorse. Okay, this is important. You're going to need to know this, please. Notice the word up here, oste, O-S-T-E, that means bone. Maybe you see some commercials for a substance called osteobiflex. It's a commercial on TV, and it's osteo for bones. It's for older people to strengthen their bones. Anything with O-S-T-E, oste or osteo, osteoarthritis is arthritis of your hands and your bones. So osteo always means bones. Let's look at the ichthyes, I-C-H-T-E-S. There's a Y in there, I understand, but just hear me out. In the early Christian church, you would draw a fish on the ground because Christianity was outlawed. And the fish was the international symbol for Christianity. The I stood for Jesus because Latin doesn't have a J. Jesus, C was Christ. H is huios, which is son. T stood for theos, of God. And then S, ichthyes, was a savior. So it stood for the ichthyes, which is basically fish, stood for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. Now, these are not the exact same letters in Greek. In Greek, the letters would be a little bit different, but it would be Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. It would be 5 letters in the Greek. Here, it's spelled a little bit differently because it's in English letters. But that's the phrase. What you would do is you would draw one half of a fish on the ground, and then if the other partner was a Christian, they would understand. They would draw the other half of the fish, the top half of the fish, and then you would understand that, okay, this guy's a Christian. This was like a secret code when Christianity was outlawed and you weren't sure. So people understood fish was the international symbol. In fact, every once in a while you travel down the road, you may see fish stickers on the back of bumpers, a little fish symbol. That's the symbol for Jesus Christ, Son of God, Savior. So that means that that person is a Christian. That was the early indication for the Christian church that the fish was the international symbol for Christianity. Chondrichthyes, again, ichthyes, fish. Chondra this time stands for cartilage. These are fish that have bones made out of cartilage. Actually, there is no bone, it's only cartilage. But they're cold-blooded, they're aquatic and scales. They breathe with their gills, and the only difference is they have skeletons made out of cartilage. That would be sharks. 800 living species, sharks, rays, and chimeras. So if you have a cartilage skeleton, you're a chondrichthyes. If you have a skeleton made out of bone, you're a osteichthyes. We are not going to cover those two fish in any of our units, so that's why I'm spending a little bit more time explaining a little bit about them, because we're not going to have units on them, which is okay. And then finally, the last class is cyclostomata. These are weird ones. They are aquatic. That means they live in the water. They are cold-blooded. They have slimy, scaleless bodies, no scales. That's the difference between if it lives in the ocean or whatever and it has scales or doesn't have scales. That would be part of it. They breathe with gills, and here's the other one. They have a skeleton made out of cartilage, like chondrichthyes, but here they do not have a jaw. They do not have a jaw. As you can see, they kind of like have a just giant opening mouth, like a sucker, and they latch onto things, and they attach themselves to it. Lampreys and hagfish. Lampreys, you'll often see them sometimes even attached to sharks, feeding off of sharks, and they're just like these little fish that'll just latch onto something and eat, but they do not have a jaw. So that's the difference between chondrichthyes, fish that are made of cartilage. They have jaws, and cyclostomata do not have a jaw. They look mostly like eels, most of these things. All right, those are my 7 classes. Let's talk now specifically about the class Mammalia, mammals. All mammals have to have the following. Usually have the following. We'll get to that. They are warm-blooded, endothermic, have hair, mammary glands, that means we feed milk to our young, breathe air with lungs as opposed to gills. They have a 4-chambered heart. This is different than other animals. Reptiles only have a 3-chamber heart. Okay. Most mammals, okay, let's go back. So this one was actually all mammals. These are the 5 characteristics that you must have in order to be a mammal. If you do not have one of these fives, you are not a mammal. No mammal. Just so we're clear. All right. Most mammals have this. There's a difference between these two, and it's going to appear on the test. It's going to say most mammals have and all mammals must have. So make sure you get the difference between these. 2 pair of limbs. That's, in other words, pair of legs, pair of arms. Or if you're like a horse or something, you have 2 pair of limbs. You have front legs and back legs. 7 neck vertebrae. The exceptions would be the sloth and the manatee. They do not have it, but almost all mammals have 7 neck vertebrae. They're born alive. Well, of course, Mr. Widener, they're born alive. No, what we're talking about is as opposed to being hatched from an egg. That would be an example of being in an egg. You're not born alive. You're born in an egg, and then you hatch out of it. So that's the difference. All right. Mammals can be divided several different ways depending on how the young are born and how they are nourished. So let's talk about mammal reproduction, types of birth. We have something called viviparous. They bear live young and nourish them during development. Most mammals are born this way. So the young come out, they're alive, and we nourish them through development. That would be like a human being. That would be like a dog or a bear or a giraffe or anything like that. Viviparous. Vi means life. So life. When they come out, they're automatically alive. Viviparous. Oviparous. Remember in the past we had OV, meaning eggs, ovulation, ovaries. So oviparous means internal fertilization. Eggs are laid and incubated, and then finally they're given birth that way. So this would be the platypus and the echinoderm have young this way. The only species of mammals that does that. Otherwise, all others are born live, but oviparous. And then the third way, which is not found in mammals, but it's found in some reptiles, is a combination of the two. Ovoviviparous. Ovo meaning egg, viviparous, vivi meaning life. So here's what happens actually. The eggs are fertilized. They're kept inside the mother. After the eggs hatch, the young come out alive. So it's a combination of the two. They have eggs, but the egg stays inside the mom. The creature breaks out of the egg inside the mom and then comes out of the mom alive. So literally, a snake doesn't lay eggs. It keeps the eggs in its body. The eggs eventually hatch, and then it hatches inside the mother's body. All the live snakes come out of the mother's body, so it's a combination of egg and live birth. And then once all the live snakes come out, the mom then expels all the egg shells. So that's a combination, again, not in mammals, found in snakes, basically. Ovoviviparous. All right. Types of nourishment. Placental. Developing young are attached to the placenta in the uterus and are given nutrients from the mother. After birth, the mother continues to nourish the babies with milk produced in mammary glands. So the placenta is the organ that basically lets all the food and blood transfer from the mother to the baby. That's what the placenta is attached to the mom, and then from that there's a cord that goes into the baby. That's the umbilical cord. So this is how most mammals do it, with a placenta. There's other kinds. There's egg laying. Developing young receive nutrients from a yolk inside the egg. After hatching, they receive milk from the mother for their nourishment. Okay. And finally, pouched. Young are born very tiny, premature. Almost premature means they're not yet fully developed. And they're kept in a pouch until they're old enough to move around on their own. Milk is available to them inside the pouch. The most classic example that you can think of this is the kangaroo. Kangaroo with a little joey that lives inside of its mother's pouch until it's mature or fully developed. All right, there are 3 habitats basically. Terms for habitat: terrestrial means living on land, comes from the Latin word terra. Terra means land. Sailors would sometimes say, if they're out on a boat, I can't wait to get back to terra firma. Firma means solid, terra is ground, so solid ground. Put my feet back on terra firma, solid ground. Aquatic, living in water. And finally, arboreal, living in trees. That's where we get our Arbor Day. Arbor literally means tree day. When I was little, before it was Earth Day, it was called Arbor Day, and you would go out and you'd plant a tree to help the environment. Arbor means trees. All right, let's talk about these different orders now. Remember, kingdom, phylum, class, order. Kingdom, phylum, class, order. So we're in the kingdom animal. We're in the phylum chordata, or vertebrate. We're in class mammal. And now after that, we have orders. So let's look at these 18 different orders of mammals. The tubuli dentata, these are eat ants, tube eating. There's only one species, that's the aardvark. Dermoptera, arboreal gliding mammals, 2 species, the flying lemur. Proboscidae, these are elephants, animals with trunks. So what defines them is if you got a trunk and you're a mammal, you're a proboscidae. There's only 2 kinds of species. There's either the African elephant or the Asian elephant. The difference between the two, there are a couple of them, but the main one is Asian elephant, the ears hang straight down. African elephants, the ears kind of go up a little bit. This would be an example of an African elephant because the ear goes up just a little bit. Sirenia. These are aquatic mammals, mammals that live in the water, 4 species, like the manatee, that's a picture there, and the dugong, it's very similar to the manatee. Monotremata, these are egg-laying mammals. So if you're a mammal and you lay eggs, that's what you got. Platypus and the echidna, there's 6 species. Pholidota, animals with horny scales, 8 species. An example of this is the pangolin. There it is right there. It curls itself up into a ball for defense, and then you can't get to it. Hyracoidae, these are defenseless mammals with padded feet. 11 species. An example would be the hyrax. Another example would be the rabbit. A rabbit is I'm sorry, that's my mistake. Rabbit's not in this group. Hyrax is in this group. My apologies. Odd-toed hoofed mammals are Perissodactyla. Dactyla means toe, and perisso means odd. Odd-toed. What does that mean? They either have 1, 3, or 5 toes. Okay? And the species would be the horse and the rhinoceros. Odd-toed. Like a horse would just have 1 toe, its hoof, 1. 1, 3, or 5. Odd-toed hoofed animals. Edentata. Toothless or peg-toothed mammals, 31 species. Armadillo and the sloth. Legomorpha, here's the rabbit. Mammals with 4 upper incisor teeth. So they got big teeth upside, almost kind of like vampire teeth. 4 big incisor teeth. Example would be the rabbit and the pika. So if you've ever played Pokemon, the Pikachu, it's actually named after an actual animal called a pika. Sometimes it's pronounced pika. Cetacea, these are marine mammals. These are 84 species, the blue whale, the bottlenose dolphin. Tree-dwelling mammals, that would be the primatas. 166 species, gorilla, ring-tailed lemur. Artiodactyla, again, that word dactyla means toe. This time artio means even. These are even-toed hoofed animals. 171 species, like the giraffe and the cow. So they either have 2, usually, or 4 toes. 2 or 4. And marsupialia. These are my pouched animals. 242 species. The koala and the kangaroo would be an example of those. Carnivora, flesh-eating mammals. 284 species, lion, walrus, and bear. Every year I get students that will do reports on these different mammal orders, and you're assigned carnivore, and they say, okay, meat eating, and they put down things like shark. Shark is a meat eater. However, shark is not a mammal. Shark is part of chondriichthyes. Therefore, it does not qualify. You have to be a mammal, and you have to have a vertebrae, and you have to have an endoskeleton, and all those other things, and you have to have lungs and be warm-blooded. And then once you're all those things, you can be a carnivora. So a shark is not warm-blooded. A shark does not have hair. A shark does not have mammary glands, and all those other things. So it has to only be a mammal that eats meat for a carnivore. Lion, walrus, and bear, examples. Insectivora, 400 species. These are insect-eating mammals. So what they did is they took all the mammals that eat insects, put them into a group, Insectivora. Vora obviously means what you eat. Carnivora, carne is meat. That's from the Greek word carniva, which is flesh or meat eating. Insectivora then would be insectivores. The mole and the shrew, a lot of these animals live underground. Not all of them, but most of them. Chiroptera, flying mammals. 875 species, the gray bat, the vampire bat. These are basically all bats in Chiroptera. Rodentia, last group, gnawing mammals. 1,687 species. Look at how big it is. Beaver, rat, squirrel, and there's like all kinds of different rats and all kinds of different squirrels and all kinds of different beavers, and there's other animals, but 1,687 different species. These animals actually have teeth that continue to grow. They're always growing all the time, and if they don't keep chewing on them, the teeth will actually curl around, wrap up, and can go inside their head and kill them. So in other words, the teeth will grow all the time. That's why they're always gnawing on things to file those teeth down. Otherwise, they continue to grow and grow and grow and grow, and will eventually grow and curl up, like I said, and go puncture into the brain and kill the mammal. All right, that is our notes. Make sure you got them all filled in. You'll need them to help you study for the test, as well as our mammal project that we have coming up. Okay, that's all. Great job today. If you didn't print out the notes, make sure to stop by school and pick up your packet along with whatever materials you have for other classes so that you can fill those in and be all set to go for the test. Take care, God bless, and have a great day.